Before I knew it, the day to report for Reserve Forces training was approaching. Takeu and I pulled out our military uniforms, which had been stashed away in the closet, with determined hearts. It wasn't my first time going to Reserve Forces training, but I really didn't want to go. Still, I was glad I was going with him. At least it wouldn't be boring. Takeu's uniform looked a bit loose. Did you lose some weight? Come to think of it. I hadn't noticed because I see him every day, but he definitely seemed thinner than before. Ellie even used her morning half-day off to drive us to the training center. Wow. You both look so cool in your uniforms. I sighed and said, no way. It's strange how even the most normal person looks foolish once they put on a military uniform. Even more so with the Reserve Forces mark on it. Takeu nodded. You could say it's a bad example of cosplay. I said to Ellie, we could have gone by ourselves. In Korea, the girlfriend sees off her boyfriend when he enlists in the military, right? It's not enlisting, it's reporting. Anyone listening would think I was re-enlisting. We got into the car and Ellie took the wheel and started driving. It takes about an hour and a half from here to the Reserve Forces Training Center. I called my mother on the way. Be careful while you're there. Don't cause any trouble. Don't worry, Mom. I'm just going for a little while. So always be careful. You got that? Yes, I got it. When I think about it, whether you're a famous celebrity or a third-generation chaebol, if you've served in the military, you're subject to reserve duty. Those people must go to training too, right? After I hung up, Ellie said with a worried expression. Come to think of it, wasn't there a shooting accident at a Reserve Forces training center last year? There was. There was an incident where a reservist opened fire on his comrades during shooting practice and then committed suicide. 3 people died, including the perpetrator, and 3 were seriously injured. Reserve Forces training centers are such dangerous places. Takeu said. No need to worry. I heard they've made thorough preparations because he's reporting. I sighed. It's not like I'm a soldier requiring special attention. I found out later that I was a soldier requiring special attention in my early days of enlistment. Not because I did anything wrong, but because my father passed away before my enlistment. If you have a sick family member or come from a broken home, you are classified as a soldier requiring special attention. What if they treat me like a useless soldier? Shut up. Ellie asked, looking confused. If you're a soldier requiring special attention, isn't it good to receive attention? And a useless soldier is a high position. He's right, but in the military those terms are used in the opposite sense. Ellie asked various questions, curious. Do you shoot guns and practice bayonet fighting every day in the military? Well, it's not like we don't do it. You only do that kind of thing in training camp. Once you're assigned to your unit, you hardly ever do it. The most common thing you do is dig, and depending on your assignment, some people get discharged without ever properly firing a gun. After all, how often would a clerk or a cook need to shoot a gun? Of course, this varies depending on the unit. If you encounter a overly enthusiastic battalion commander or company commander, it becomes a headache. How much do they pay for training? It's probably 13,001 for local reserve training. Ellie nodded. If you train for 8 hours a day, that's 104,001 a day, which is a bit low. I think they could pay more. Well, perhaps because she's a foreigner, she has a huge misunderstanding about the South Korean military. No, it's not 13,001 per hour, they pay 13,001 per day. Ellie smiled at my words. Come on, don't joke around. Then Takeu said, and that includes food and transportation costs. Ellie was shocked. No way. There's no way a country with the economic scale of Korea would provide training for less than the price of a whole chicken. The hourly wage for soldiers in Korea is even worse than that of prisoners doing labor in jail. Takeu thought for a moment and then said, still, they probably pay more than the North Korean army, right? Cars and buses carrying reservists entered the training ground one after another. We parked the car a little further away so as not to attract attention. I gave Ellie a light kiss. Hyung, what am I going to do if I miss you? You get off work at 6. That's the advantage of local reserve training. Still, I'll call you when it's over. Come back safe. We got out of the car and walked into the training center. It wasn't like a celebrity enlisting, but there were even reporters gathered in front. I tried to go in while pulling my hat down as much as possible and keeping my head down, but the reporters blocked my path and held out microphones. Come to think of it, my name is stitched onto my uniform. What are your thoughts on participating in reserve forces training? Aren't you worried about the recent shooting accident? What are your thoughts on the recent military procurement corruption scandal? Are you considering investing in the defense industry in the future? What kind of questions are these? I looked at the cameras and said briefly, I will train hard. Reservists were already gathered in the drill square. Seeing them reminded me of when I enlisted. The reservists looked at me with amazement. Wow. It's Kang Jin-hoo. I didn't think he'd come, but he actually came. I never thought I'd see Kang Jin-hoo here. This is awesome. So this is my level of popularity. The reservists around me seemed hesitant but cautiously greeted me. I greeted each one back. In the meantime, the entrance ceremony began. The battalion commander stood on the platform and said, This battalion commander is very proud of the reservists gathered here to protect the nation and its people. Taekyu asked me in a small voice, Why does he refer to himself in the third person? How is that any different from saying, Taekyu is so happy? You're right. Our unit's company commander also had a habit of saying, This company commander is very disappointed in you. And every time I heard that, this soldier was also very disappointed in the company commander. And it made my hands and feet curl up. New recruits would stand at attention with their posture straight, but the reservists yawned with their legs apart, no matter what the battalion commander said. After the entrance ceremony, we moved to the training ground and full-fledged reserve forces training began. Team leaders, charge towards the hill. Anyone who has received reserve forces training knows that it feels like something between training and a field trip. The reservists who had abandoned their livelihoods to protect the nation and its people moved as if they hadn't eaten in a week. Even the North Korean soldiers during their arduous march or the Red Army at the end of the long march might have been better than this. Seniors, run a little faster. Don't drag your guns on the ground. It felt like just yesterday I was working in the CEO's office, but today I'm wearing a combat helmet and military gear and holding an M16. What am I even doing here? Taekyu hummed a song next to me. Who am I and where is this? The nation is calling me from afar. He's really enjoying this. Taekyu said with a grin. Isn't it fun doing squad-level battle after a long time? I asked, dumbfounded. Is this fun? Is it? Yeah. It feels like playing an FPS game. It's great. What was the nation doing? Not taking this guy as an active-duty soldier. He's having fun because he was a public service worker and only had to do 4 weeks of training. But I was active duty, so I did this crap throughout my entire military service. To make matters worse, I had a bad military service number and met a battalion commander who was unnecessarily enthusiastic, so I went through every type of training, including field training, winter training, and tactical training. Due to the reservists' physical fitness and morale plummeting below the Earth's core, the training was eventually replaced with a demonstration by an excellent drill instructor. When break time came, everyone plopped down on the dirt, put cigarettes in their mouths and started talking. We already suffered enough in the military, why do we have to do reserve forces training? It's all because of those damn generals. They need reservists to maintain their number of stars. Those guys are the real useless soldiers. Remember when that 2-star general got caught abusing his official duties with his wife against the soldiers assigned to his residence? They should use the money they pay those bastards to raise our training pay. Ugh, this dirty world. A reservist approached me and cautiously offered me a cigarette. Chairman, want to smoke? No thanks. I don't smoke. Could I get an autograph later? Sure, no problem. At first they seemed a bit wary of me, but soon they asked me various questions with curiosity, and I answered whatever I could. We'll be training together for a few days, so it wouldn't hurt to get to know each other. A young man with bleached blonde hair groaned, clutching his back. My back hasn't been feeling good since earlier. Should I go to the medical tent? Then a man who had been picking his nose and making silly jokes said, Where does it hurt exactly? The left side of my back has been throbbing for a few days. Lift up your shirt. Let me take a look. Are you? I'm a resident in the orthopedic department at Silla University Hospital. Everyone was surprised at his words. Oh, really? Ah, you're a doctor. Even doctors look the same when they're wearing military uniforms for reserve forces training. Everyone was resting diligently when a drill instructor approached and said, Seniors, break time is over. Then everyone lay down and pretended to be sick. I think I twisted my ankle. Ugh. I can't feel anything below my waist. I have a bit of a headache. My shoulder's dislocated. Can you see my arm dangling? Call 911 right now and have them take me away. As expected of a reserve forces training center, a miracle occurs where even healthy people become patients. So, how do you perform the miracle of turning patients back into healthy people? It's lunchtime. Then the reservists who couldn't get up because they were in pain all stood up at once. What are you waiting for, drill instructor? Let's go eat. After the first day of training was over, we took the car that was waiting for us and returned home. By the time we got home, the sun had already set. Going to reserve forces training after working at the office every day felt like going camping. Yeah, right. I suffered like crazy as an active duty soldier, and now I have to do this even after being discharged. The thought of having to do this again tomorrow made an unbearable anger boil up inside me. Think positively. I don't want to. Then take, you said. Think about His Excellency lying in a cold prison cell resenting you. Compared to that, you're happy. Why is His Excellency coming up now? The next day, we headed to the training center again for more reserve forces training. While receiving first aid training, the reservists yawned or dozed off. I wanted to doze off too, but since there were many eyes watching me, I pretended to listen intently. First, check the casualty's breathing and pulse and then perform CPR. The important thing here is, the corporal instructor demonstrated CPR in front of a dummy. Seeing that reminded me of the past. Explosions, smoke, the smell of gunpowder, a soldier grabbing his leg and screaming. After training, I was assigned as a mortarman. My squad leader was a newly promoted sergeant. His name was Kim Jae-hak. He was 2 years older than me, didn't go to college after graduating high school, and did various jobs before enlisting in the military. He said his dream was to earn money after being discharged and open his own store. There's no place where people's true nature is more evident than in the military. In that regard, Sergeant Kim Jae-hak was a pretty decent guy. We also got along really well. But about 3 months before his discharge, a problem occurred. During mortar firing practice, a new model mortar exploded. Thanks to the foresight that appeared in front of my eyes at that moment, I quickly dropped to the ground. Thanks to that, I was fine except for not being able to hear properly. But the platoon leader died on the spot, and Sergeant Kim Jae-hak suffered serious injuries when shrapnel hit his leg. Even at a glance, his condition was gruesome. That was the last time I saw him. After being discharged from the military hospital and returning to my unit, I heard that Sergeant Kim Jae-hak had his right leg amputated below the knee and was medically discharged. We said we'd see each other often after being discharged. I thought I should visit him sometime. But from the day I was discharged, various things happened and I completely forgot about it. I wonder how he's doing now. I bought frozen jampong and dumplings from the PX for lunch and microwaved them. Take, you said. It's good to have this after a long time. Right. I took a bite and nodded. Gotta agree with that. Should we buy some to take home? It won't taste the same outside. But eating it in the military, it's as good as a Michelin 3-star meal. After finishing, I bought ice cream for dessert. I watched the busy assistants running around and said, those guys are going through it too. Truthfully, training reservists is no easy task. Especially when they don't listen. If you feel bad, prepay about 100 million won to the PX and leave. Why only feed the guys frozen food instead of proper meals? You do it. It's not well known, but he has hundreds of millions in cash and tens of trillions in assets. Some reservists, acting chummy, started talking to me. It's a reserve training camp, so there are all sorts of people. Why are you asking me which stocks are good to invest in and whether you should buy a house now? In the afternoon, there's squad-level battle training. As we moved to the training grounds, it started to drizzle. This kind of weather is the most annoying. I'd rather it just pour so outdoor training gets cancelled and we move indoors. But when it's like this, there's a chance we have to train in the rain. While sitting at the training grounds listening to the instructor's explanation, the raindrops started to get bigger. The reservists cheered. It's raining. Shouldn't we go inside now? The ground is muddy, it's hard to sit here. Let's go inside. At this point, we should definitely go inside. The instructors also seemed to think it would be difficult to proceed with the training and reported the situation via radio. But suddenly, like an emergency had been declared, the officers started running around. Taekyu muttered, watching them. What? Did the North Koreans invade or something? At that moment, an instructor who had received a radio message shouted, "Something big happened." "What is it?" "The Chief of Staff of the Army is coming." The reservists reacted in disbelief. "What? The Chief of Staff of the Army? Does it even make sense for the Chief of Staff of the Army to come to a reserve training camp? Even when I was active duty, I never saw anyone higher than a division commander." "What's the rank of the Chief of Staff of the Army?" "A 4-star general." "A full general? Why would a 4-star general come here?" Everyone's gaze turned to me. Could it be because of me? If that's the case, it's likely due to my relationship with the US rather than my wealth. The South Korean military has close ties with the US military. And as everyone knows, I'm very close with US President Ronald Stamper, the Commander-in-Chief of the US Armed Forces. Still, is there a need to come all the way to the training grounds? Of course, the Chief of Staff of the Army wouldn't be moving alone. He'd have a whole entourage following him. Probably a brigadier general playing the role of the youngest. Anyone who's been in the military knows that nothing is more tiring than a high-ranking officer visiting. Even when a 1-star general comes, the unit is turned upside down a week in advance. The entire barracks gets buffed with toothpaste, and the firearms and equipment are polished until they shine. Every fallen leaf and speck of dust is eradicated from the roads, making the entire unit resemble a sterile room. The soldiers suffer and die for days doing this. But once it's all done, the schedule might change and they don't even come. Ideally, a reservist should maintain an unwavering composure even if North Korean soldiers appear before their eyes. Therefore, even hearing that the Chief of Staff of the Army was coming, there wasn't much reaction. We're civilians anyway, what does it matter how many stars someone has? As I was thinking that, the platoon leader standing in front of the reservists said, "From now on we will train by the book. All trainees lie down on the ground and move through the obstacles by crawling." Everyone was taken aback by those words. "Hey, platoon leader. What are you talking about? You're telling us to crawl? It's raining. Mister. Can't you see the ground is wet?" Usually, if reservists protest, they compromise to some extent. But the platoon leader didn't even blink. Reservists who don't follow orders will be forcibly dismissed. Execute forward crawling. There's a strong smell of a problem soldier coming from this unfamiliar platoon leader. He doesn't seem to know yet, but provoking reservists isn't good for anyone. One reservist threw his rifle on the ground and shouted, "I'm not doing it. What does it matter to me whether the Chief of Staff of the Army comes or not?" Then the platoon leader glared at him and said, "If you don't pick up your rifle and participate in the training immediately, you will be forcibly dismissed." What do soldiers fear the most? Extra-military training, CBR training, obstacle course, winter training. No matter how difficult the training is, they can endure it. However, they can't endure their military service getting extended. That's why being confined to the guardhouse is the worst punishment in the military. The days spent there get added to their service time. So what do reservists fear the most? It's being forcibly dismissed. Because for every hour missed, they have to come back and train again. No one wants to do this for another day, right? After a moment of hesitation, he eventually picked up his rifle. Ugh. Seriously. Under the platoon leader's orders, we crawled through the muddy ground, getting soaked in the cold rain. The reservists were grinding their teeth. Damn it. I'm going crazy. Is this reserve training or obstacle course training? I didn't even do this when I was active duty. Take you crawling next to me said, "This is all because of you." I meekly protested. Why is this because of me? Then who else would he be here to see, these reservist old guys? Is it because of me after all? Due to the collective living nature of the military, if one person messes up, everyone suffers. That's why having a problem soldier in the unit is a headache. According to the law of conservation of problem soldiers, every unit has at least one. If you went through your military service without one, there's a high chance you were the problem soldier. When I was a private first class, a junior soldier on weekend guard duty support lost a blank round. You might think losing one blank round isn't a big deal, but in the military, if even one empty cartridge case goes missing, all hell breaks loose. Our break was immediately cancelled, and the entire unit was mobilized to find the blank round. Up to this point, it was still a mistake anyone could make. What was absurd was that the blank round was found in the junior soldier's pocket. Only then did he confess that he had dropped his magazine, the blank round had fallen out, and he had put it in his pocket but forgot. He also admitted that he realized it right away but was too scared to say anything. The way they looked at that junior soldier back then is the same way they're looking at me now, or is it just my imagination? I feel sorry that I've become the problem soldier without even realizing it. As we were diligently crawling on the ground in the rain, the Chief of Staff of the Army and his generals appeared in a line, guided by the battalion commander. Everyone else had umbrellas while we were getting rained on. There was also an officer with a camera behind them. Did the defense daily come? The platoon leader snapped a sharp salute. Sir. Chief of Staff of the Army, General Choi Hyung-woon, looked around the training grounds and asked, "What kind of training is going on right now?" "Squad-level battle training, sir." "Do you always train like this?" The platoon leader's face showed pride. "Yes, sir." At that moment Taekyu suddenly coughed and shouted, "Cough cough. I'm too cold and sick to do this." Then the other reservists, as if they had been waiting for this, lay down and started groaning. "Ugh. My elbow. My shoulder popped out again. I think my leg is broken. Cough. My cancer relapsed. Help me." As the reservists staged a simultaneous sabotage, the battalion commander and platoon leader's expressions hardened. General Choi Hyung-woon said to the platoon leader, "The weather is bad today. Why are you putting the reservists through such difficult training? If they catch a cold and their combat readiness deteriorates, that's a huge national loss." "I'm sorry, sir." The battalion commander immediately shouted, "What are you doing? Stop the training immediately." "Why, sir?" "Cease training." The reservists who had been crying out in pain immediately jumped up and brushed the mud off their clothes. The lieutenant general and major general behind him clicked their tongues and said, "You have to consider the situation when training. Those young officers nowadays don't know moderation. The battalion commander was pale, but the platoon leader still looked like he didn't know what he had done wrong. He's definitely a problem soldier. The battalion commander and the soldiers are going to have a hard time with him. General Choi Hyung-woon approached me. "Oh. Representative Kang Jin-hoo is here for training too." Then Taekyu muttered loud enough for him to hear. "He's talking like he didn't know he was coming? It's obvious he's here because of Kang Jin-hoo." General Choi Hyung-woon seemed embarrassed by those words and cleared his throat. Ahem. The battalion commander behind him was at a loss for what to do. If he were active duty he'd send him to the guardhouse immediately, but he's a civilian so there's nothing he can do. General Choi Hyung-woon asked me, "Are there any difficulties with the reserve training?" When did this guy start talking to me so casually? When I didn't say anything he smiled and said, "Haha, don't feel pressured, just tell me comfortably what's difficult." "It's obviously difficult because of you. How can you not know that? Are you a problem soldier too?" I glanced at the reservists looking like drenched rats and then said, "As you saw, everyone was doing their best in the training. It's cold and it's still raining so it would be great if we could finish early." "I see." General Choi Hyung-woon nodded and asked the battalion commander. "The reservists seem to have trained very hard today. Is early dismissal possible?" Then the battalion commander answered in a booming voice, like a fully disciplined private first class. "Yes, sir. We will dismiss all reservists immediately." At those words, the resentment that had been directed at me just moments ago melted away like snow. The reservists all raised their hands and let out cheers of joy. Woo-woo. Chief of Staff of the Army Choi Hyung-woon makes surprise visit to reserve training camp. /strong. Omitted. General Choi Hyung-woon visited the reserve training camp to inspect the unit facilities and training status, encouraging the instructors and reservists. General Choi Hyung-woon emphasized the importance of reserve training, stating, "Reservists are a core force in defending the Republic of Korea from enemy invasion in times of emergency." He also expressed pride in the reservists who diligently participate in training despite their civilian occupations. Comments were pouring in below the article. "I'm a rubber shoe who sent her boyfriend to the military 3 months ago. I'm not sure, but is the Chief of Staff of the Army a very high rank? I heard the Chief of Staff of the Army is a 4-star general so he's probably the same rank as a platoon leader or company commander. I'm also a rubber shoe and my boyfriend is an officer, currently a platoon leader." Happy face. "Wait, what are you talking about? A platoon leader is the same rank as the Chief of Staff of the Army? That's like saying a new employee at Samsung Electronics is the same as Im Jin-young." Exactly. A platoon leader would be a second lieutenant lol. Those second lieutenants these days have no respect. Full of problem soldiers. Glad I got discharged last month. More importantly, why did the Chief of Staff of the Army go to a reserve training camp? He went to see Kang Jin-ho. What a bolt from the blue for the instructors because of Kang Jin-ho. I wonder what that private in the picture was thinking while shaking his hand. Look at the battalion commander's face in the back. Promotion denial confirmed? The reservists are all grinning hee. Whether it's the Chief of Staff or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for Reservists, they're just some random old guy. Chief of Staff Choi Hyung-woon's inner thoughts equals he. If these guys were active duty, I'd send them all to the guardhouse for 14 nights and 15 days. Can't do anything since they're civilians. Reservists' inner thoughts equals he. We don't care if you're a 4-star general or whatever, just send us home early. I wonder who will visit on the last day. Isn't President Hyo Chong-min going to come see the closing ceremony? The president is on a European tour right now. I have a feeling the commander of the United States Forces Korea will go. Taekyu said. Someone is saying the commander of the United States Forces Korea might come too. I chuckled in disbelief. Don't be ridiculous. Why would the commander of the United States Forces Korea come to a reserve training camp? Commander of the United States Forces Korea, General Charlie Schutz, has arrived at the gate. And then it actually happened. This time even the reservists were murmuring. Yesterday it was the Chief of Staff of the Army, today it's the Commander of the United States Forces Korea? Since he's a U.S. Army general, isn't his rank the same as the Chief of Staff of the Army? Hey, don't compare him to a Korean military big shot. His authority is incomparable. A military enthusiast explained to the other reservists. The commander of the United States Forces Korea is also the commander of the ROKUS Combined Forces Command and in wartime, also serves as the commander of the United Nations Command. Oh, is that so? The commander of the UN Command has wartime operational control. If war breaks out, the commander of the United States Forces Korea commands all the forces within the Korean peninsula. The reservists were shocked. What? Then he's the ultimate authority in the military. He'd be in the top 10 even within the U.S. military. Why would someone like that come to a reserve training camp? Everyone's gaze turned to me. A little while later, Commander Schutz actually appeared. Behind him were rows of U.S. generals as well as Korean generals. How many stars are there? And the battalion commander looked like he was about to lose his mind. Is this all because of me too? Charlie C. Schutz. Appointed as the commander of the United States Forces Korea following Ronald's Greater Asia Strategy, he was an African American. Though not particularly large in stature, he had a sturdy build and piercing eyes. He looked every bit the quintessential soldier at first glance. Indeed, a U.S. 4-star general would have meticulously followed the elite military course. But why would such a person come to a reserve training camp? Well, considering reservists are also a major force in wartime, it wouldn't be entirely strange for the wartime operational commander to come and inspect their training status. Though this is strange. This situation is clearly bizarre to anyone. The reservists spoke in hushed voices. Isn't this being broadcast on terrestrial TV? Terrestrial TV? It'll be reported by foreign news outlets too. I bet it's being broadcast on North Korea's Korean Central Television right now. That was a strong possibility. From North Korea's perspective, they would be keenly interested in the every move of the commander of the USFK. The sudden appearance of the U.S. military put the reservists on edge. Everyone who had been dozing off or sleeping was now wide awake. The battalion commander spoke in a trembling voice. Commander of the United States Forces Korea General Schutz has visited to encourage you reservists. Please welcome him with applause. His expression seemed to say, please clap. Please. I'm begging you. Fortunately, the reservists clapped dutifully. Clap, clap, clap. Commander Schutz stepped forward and began to speak. It was naturally in English, and a U.S. military officer who appeared to be Korean American provided immediate interpretation. Greetings, reservists of Korea. I am Charlie Schutz, Commander of the United States Forces Korea. I am very pleased to meet you reservists in this setting. I am well aware of the crucial role of the reserves in the defense of Korea. I thank you reservists for diligently performing this difficult training for the nation. And lastly, Commander Schütz looked around at the reservists sitting in the auditorium and said with a smile, "I will ensure that everyone is dismissed early today." 2 days in a row of winning the early dismissal lottery. Upon hearing the translation, the reservists once again raised their arms and cheered. Woo-woo. I was quite surprised. To think the commander of the USFK would so accurately understand what the Korean reservists wanted. Commander Schütz shook hands with each of the soldiers and reservists, offering words of encouragement. Everyone who shook his hand shouted with enthusiasm. Private First Class Kim Hee-chon. I will do my best. Major Lee Han-jun. It is an immense honor to meet the commander. Of course, this was limited to the active duty soldiers. The reservists shook hands casually but respectfully. When it was my turn, Commander Schütz grasped my hand and said, "I've been wanting to meet you, Mr. Kong." I smiled and said, "The pleasure is mine." I have quite a history with the U.S. military. During the Big One incident, both the National Guard and federal troops were deployed for victim rescue. I had the opportunity to meet the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, and the Chief of Staff of the Army while accompanying Ronald. They all expressed their deep gratitude to me. The United States will never forget what Mr. Kong has done. Please visit our bases anytime. I nodded. Understood. I will definitely visit when I have the opportunity. My ties with the U.S. military are this deep. So why do conservative groups and some politicians call me a pro-North Korean communist? The dismissal ceremony, 2 hours ahead of schedule, ended. After returning my rifle and gear, I was finally free. Felt like shedding a heavy burden. Is this the end of reserve training for this year? Why are you like this, acting like an amateur? We still have the wartime mobilization training left. I really should change my nationality. Or maybe just move the headquarters to the U.S. Whether it was because the commander of the USFK had visited or not, there was a large crowd of reporters in front of the gate. Fortunately, we got into the car driven by my bodyguard before the reporters could catch us. I called the head of the public relations team on the way. "Aren't you in training right now?" "It just finished." "I see. You must be very tired from the difficult training." "Just sitting there is tiring, though." I took off my military uniform top in the car and said, "Find me someone." Back home, we changed into comfortable clothes and relaxed on the sofa. I thought about stopping by the office since we finished early, but once I got home I didn't feel like doing anything. The company runs fine without me anyway. The commander of the USFK's visit to the reserve training camp was, predictably, a hot topic. As soon as I turned on the news, Commander Charlie Schütz's image appeared. Since he hadn't brought any reporters with him, there were no pictures of him shaking hands with me. Instead, interviews with reservists who were there were being aired. In the evening, Ellie came over to visit. She was still in her business suit, having come straight from work. "Hi. I'm here. Welcome. I brought sushi for dinner." Instead of going to the dining table, we decided to eat at the living room table. While Ellie was unpacking the sushi, I took a bottle of white wine from the wine fridge. "Thank you for the food." We lightly clinked our wine glasses. "You both must be tired from the training." "Tired?" We just sat around and came back. Still, I was a little worried. "I've heard there are a lot of accidents in the Korean military." Taekyu nodded. "True. Our Jean who had a big accident in the military once." Ellie's eyes widened at his words. "An accident? Well, there's no need to hide it now, is there?" I told her about the mortar explosion accident that happened during training in the past. Of course, I left out the part about seeing a vision for the first time. Ellie gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. "Oh, really? Something like that happened?" "No one knows about it except Taekyu. I didn't tell my mother either, worried it would concern her." "He still doesn't know." "Weren't you hurt?" "Of course not. As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. Fortunately, I saw the vision right before the accident and ducked, so nothing serious happened. I suffered from hearing problems for a while, though. If my reaction had been even a second slower, I would have been killed on the spot or seriously injured." "But why did the mortar explode?" I gave a bitter smile. "It had a defect from the start." Taekyu found an article from that time on his phone and showed it to her. The KM-188 was a new type of mortar developed by Won Precision Chemicals. It was first supplied to the Korean military, and overseas export contracts to Turkey and Indonesia were also in progress. If it had simply exploded, they might have covered it up somehow. However, one person died in the explosion and another was seriously injured. Once the explosion accident became public, the investigation team collected all the KM-188s and conducted a thorough investigation. The results were shocking. The new mortar had a serious defect from the beginning. Naturally, all military supplies and overseas exports were cancelled. But it didn't end there. The subsequent investigation revealed that the Defense Acquisition Program Administration (DAPA) had been aware of the defect but had manipulated the inspection results to pass it. Ali asked with a bewildered expression. So, they approved the supply even though they knew about the defect? Yes. Why? Because they received kickbacks. Corruption in the South Korean military has a very long history. The most famous incident is the National Defense Corps incident. When the Korean War broke out due to the North Korean invasion, the Syngman Rhee government conscripted civilians to form the National Defense Corps, a force of approximately 500,000 men, to counter the advancing enemy forces. It was a kind of reserve force. However, the commanders at the top embezzled the budget meant to clothe and feed this force. The soldiers, without proper supplies, suffered from hunger, cold, and disease. In the end, without ever engaging in combat, 20% of the force died from starvation, exposure, or disease during marches. Approximately 90,000 Allied soldiers died not from enemy bullets, but from the corruption of their commanders. This is one of the worst incidents of its kind in the world. Decades have passed since then, but military supply and procurement corruption has not been eradicated. While soldiers no longer starve or freeze to death, deaths due to accidents are still common. Listing all the examples would fill several books. How can soldiers whose job it is to protect the country do such things? Isn't that tantamount to treason or betrayal? Takei took a piece of sushi and said, "Some call it a livelihood crime." Ali asked, looking bewildered. "Hey, are you joking?" I sighed and said, "The Minister of National Defense actually said that." Takei nodded. It was the Minister of National Defense appointed by the President. When it was revealed that the mortar explosion was not a simple accident but a man-made disaster caused by DAPA's corruption, the political world was shaken. At the National Assembly's National Defense Committee plenary meeting, lawmakers from both the ruling and opposition parties strongly criticized the military procurement corruption. However, Minister of National Defense Ha Mingyu infuriated the public by stating that, unlike in the past, many cases of military procurement corruption these days are livelihood crimes. One lawmaker was so dumbfounded that he jumped up and shouted, "Jean Valjean stealing bread because he's hungry is a livelihood crime, but accepting billions of won from defense contractors and turning a blind eye to defects is a livelihood crime?" Logically speaking, would a staff sergeant or a second lieutenant receive bribes or kickbacks? Of course, it would be generals with several stars on their shoulders who would take the money. Anyway, this incident led to an expansion of the investigation into military procurement corruption in general, and even a former chief of naval operations was arrested. At this point, it's no exaggeration to say that the entire military is a hotbed of corruption and irregularities. I finished the wine in my glass in one go. I hadn't had many glasses, but the alcohol was hitting me quickly tonight. Because of that livelihood crime, someone lost their life and someone lost their leg. The voice of Private Kim Jae-hak, clutching his leg and crying out in pain, was still vivid in my mind. Was there proper compensation? Of course not. While hospitalized in the military hospital, I had the opportunity to meet other soldiers lying in their beds. The military never sends you to the hospital unless you are seriously ill. Therefore, being hospitalized in a military hospital meant you were badly injured. Most of them were worried about future treatment and compensation. I learned there that South Korea prohibits soldiers from filing compensation lawsuits against the state. Ellie asked, looking like she couldn't understand. Really? There are very few countries that prohibit soldiers from suing for compensation. They made that rule to avoid responsibility after a large number of casualties occurred during the Vietnam War deployment. While I was receiving treatment, the company commander, battalion commander, and division commander visited me in turn. They all emphasized that I should not do anything that could create a negative perception of the military, such as giving media interviews or posting things online. If word got out, it would cause trouble for the entire unit. Since I had already asked them not to contact home, worried it would worry my mother, I had no intention of saying anything anyway. Ellie asked, Doesn't Korea have systems like National Merit Recipients or Veterans Affairs? They do, but becoming one of them is harder than a camel passing through the eye of a needle. Taekyu said, don't the employees of the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs become National Merit Recipients even if they trip while hiking or stub their toe on a threshold? This might sound like a joke, but it's true. There's even an employee who became a National Merit Recipient after causing a traffic accident and injuring others. Ellie's face was slightly flushed, the alcohol starting to take effect. Why doesn't Korea take responsibility for soldiers injured while serving the country? Who knows? They're called the nation's sons when they're being drafted, but when they're injured or die, they're someone else's sons. That's why people say dying in the military is like a dog's death. What about that senior soldier you were close to? How is he doing now? I poured the remaining wine and drank it. I wonder that myself. A few days later, I was at the office, discussing lunch options with Taekyu, when Public Relations Team Leader Young Ji-hong burst into the CEO's office. What's wrong? Senior Ji-hong said to me. We found the person you mentioned, Kim Jae-hak. The yellow Lamborghini Aventador sped down the wide-open Jeju Expressway. I sat in the passenger seat and asked the brown-haired beauty wearing sunglasses in the driver's seat. How is it to drive? The amenities are definitely better in this one. Shall we ask Chairman Im Jin-young to swap it? He probably hasn't sold everything off yet, so if we ask nicely he might. She seemed to ponder for a moment before saying decisively, no. I still prefer driving a Ferrari. Why is that? There's a subtle feeling to it that's hard to explain. And the roof opens too. The weather's starting to get warmer, so I need to enjoy some open-top driving. I pictured Ellie driving the Ferrari with the roof completely open. She looked so good in it she could be a Ferrari promotional model. Looking in the side mirror, I saw the black sedans carrying the bodyguards tailing us closely. Ellie said, I'm glad we found him quickly. So what is he doing now? Apparently he runs a pizza place in Payu. That's why we're rushing over from work. When I said I was going to Payu, Ellie insisted on coming with me, taking Hyunju's car to follow. Taekyu couldn't come along today because he had to go to his parents' place with Hyunju. Still, the fact that you were trying to find him like this means he must have been a good person. That's right. He's a good person. Military seniors are divided into two types. Those you never want to see again after leaving the service, and those you definitely want to meet up with. And those you definitely want to meet up with are further divided into two types. Those you want to beat up and those you want to have a drink with. Kim Jae-hak is definitely the latter. After exiting the Jeju Expressway and entering the city, I could feel people's gazes on us. Even though there are a lot of foreign cars these days, it's not easy to see supercars like Ferraris or Lamborghinis. Ellie parked the car in a nearby public parking lot. We walked into an alley with the bodyguards in plain clothes following a little behind us. After a while we stopped walking. Is this it? Seems like it. The sign read Meister Pizza. It's a popular pizza franchise these days. If you turn on the TV, you see commercials with famous celebrities as their models. Thanks to that, they're rapidly expanding their branches despite being a new franchise. I think a big one opened up near the company recently. Taekyu ordered from there once and he said the taste was pretty good. As we were about to enter the store, a man came out to smoke. He was about 175 centimeters tall, with a sharp jawline, friendly eyes, short hair, and a slightly protruding forehead. When his eyes met mine, he was startled and dropped the cigarette he was holding. As surely Kang Jin-hoo? I smiled and said, long time no see. He limped towards me. Hey Kang Jin-hoo. What brings you here? I smiled and replied, you told me to come find you after I was discharged, didn't you? He was wearing long pants so you couldn't see it, but his right leg was probably prosthetic. He was much thinner than before. He used to work out and take supplements so he had some muscle. Looking pleased, he turned his gaze to my side. Who's this? She's my girlfriend. Ah, your girlfriend. His expression was filled with surprise and envy. Ah, is she foreigner? She speaks Korean well, so you don't have to worry. Ellie smiled and greeted him. Hello. Jin-hoo has told me a lot about you. My name is Ellie. Yes, hello. I'm Kim Jae-hak, Jin-hoo's senior. Kim Jae-hak said happily. You haven't eaten yet, right? I'll make you some pizza, so come on in. The bodyguards waited outside and we went inside. It was a small shop with about 6 tables. It looked like it hadn't been open long as the interior and fixtures were clean. While we sat down, he expertly started making pizza. It was an open kitchen so we could see him making it. Ellie said to me in a low voice, "What's wrong? Your tone has become a bit stiff since earlier." Ah. Meeting a senior from my military days must have made me subconsciously revert to military speech. Is this the scary thing about habits? The steaming pizza was placed on the table. Tasted pretty good. We ate pizza and chatted about various things. I almost had a heart attack when I saw you on TV. I bet everyone in the unit did. Indeed, who would have imagined that a soldier you ate and slept alongside in the barracks would become the CEO of a giant corporation? Kim Jae-hak smiled. Come to think of it, the same goes for me. When you see disabled people on TV, it feels like it's happening to someone else entirely. I never imagined I'd end up like this. When I think about it, it's a strange thing. We experienced the same accident in the same place. But while I gained the superpower of precognition, he lost a leg. And from that point on, both of our lives changed dramatically. I also spent about a month in the military hospital after the accident. I heard the news after returning to the unit. What have you been up to since then? We were transferred to different military hospitals. Unlike me, who was fine, his condition was serious. Kim Jae-hak told us about his treatment and rehabilitation in the military hospital. Did you receive proper compensation? It varies depending on the grade, but if you go through a disability review, you get disability compensation. How much? 8 million won. At those words, Ellie's eyes widened in surprise. Wait a minute. 8 million won? Not $8 million. If a similar accident had happened in the US military, receiving $8 million in compensation wouldn't have been unusual. But this is South Korea. The cost of a private's leg is only 8 million won. They probably think that's even a lot to give. Ellie said as if shouting, "This is ridiculous. Why does Korea treat soldiers who were injured while serving the country like this?" I want to ask that too. If the country genuinely didn't have the money, I might be able to understand it. But South Korea has already joined the ranks of developed nations and is wealthier than most European countries. So this isn't a problem of money but of perception and will. The idea that it's natural for soldiers to sacrifice for the country, so why should they be compensated? What about other compensation? That's the end of the national compensation. He explained it to us. Disability compensation from the medical review is paid only once. And since privates aren't career soldiers, they aren't eligible for military pensions. Therefore, they can't receive injury pensions or national merit pensions either. What's even more absurd is that if you're injured by North Korean mortar fire, it's classified as a combat injury, but if you're injured by the explosion of a South Korean mortar, it's classified as an injury in the line of duty, resulting in reduced compensation. So, if you're going to get hurt, getting hurt by North Koreans is the way to receive even a little more compensation. It sounds like crazy talk, but that's what the law says. At this point, it's dumbfounding. Ellie asked as if something had just occurred to her. What about company compensation? If the accident wasn't caused by user error but by a defect in the product, the manufacturer should also be liable for damages. That's right. Soldiers can't sue the government for compensation, but they can sue the manufacturer. Kim Jae-hak's expression darkened. I just settled for 50 million won. But this is a secret. You're not supposed to disclose the settlement details. 50 million won? Why did you agree to that? What was I supposed to do when the division commander and corps commander came to the hospital and told me to sign the settlement agreement? I also needed to get treatment. While he was hospitalized receiving treatment, generals suddenly appeared and urged him to settle. They called it urging, but it wasn't easy for a sergeant to refuse the words of generals. They said that they needed to settle with the company first for the national compensation to proceed properly. They pushed him to settle and he ended up signing it without really knowing what he was doing. In short, the Ministry of National Defense brokered the settlement on behalf of the defense contractor. Ellie looked bewildered again. Shouldn't the Ministry of National Defense be helping the soldier receive the maximum compensation possible? Why are they taking the company's side? I guess the Ministry of National Defense likes defense contractors. Since the Defense Acquisition Program Administration had turned a blind eye to the defects causing the incident, they probably wanted to resolve the issue quietly without causing too much trouble. Kim Jae-hak forced a smile. Still, thanks to that money I was able to open this store. Otherwise, I'd probably be at home leeching off my parents. The atmosphere seemed to be getting heavier, so I changed the subject. If you saw me on TV, why didn't you come visit the company? He said jokingly. I used to scold you a lot when you were a private. I thought I might get beaten up if I came. I burst out laughing. We promised not to hit each other if we met in the real world, didn't we? How can I trust that? Well, there are occasional news stories about people assaulting their military seniors on the street. He wore a bitter expression. And I wasn't really in a position to visit with this body. At those words, the atmosphere became heavy again. Did any of the other unit members come to visit? A few came, but I didn't meet them. Junior and senior soldiers he barely remembered were able to visit, but his closest comrade, his mentor, didn't come, worrying about causing trouble. Seeing this, it seems the saying, those who have much don't come, those who have little don't stay away, is true. Does it hurt? Kim Jae-hak touched the area below his right knee. It does. There's pain and sometimes my toes feel itchy. Phantom pain? You might think, how can a leg that isn't there hurt? But this is a common symptom for amputees. For about a year after the injury, I couldn't even sleep at night. It was so painful and itchy, but I couldn't scratch or touch it. It was driving me crazy. Sounded terrible just thinking about it. Ellie also looked shocked, covering her mouth with her hand. Well, it's much better now. It bothers me sometimes, but it doesn't keep me up at night. I looked around the pizza place. Still, you managed to open a shop after all? Kim Jae-hak chuckled. What else could I do? I can't exactly get hired anywhere with this body. It's a world where even able-bodied people struggle to find jobs. It must be even harder with a disability. As we were talking, I sensed something was off. We'd been here for about an hour and it had been too quiet. If a customer had recognized me, I would have taken photos with them and signed autographs. It would be good publicity if it went up on social media. But not a single customer had come in during that time. The store was small, so they probably did mostly delivery, but there hadn't been any delivery orders either. I asked cautiously, is this usually a slow time? Ellie also looked puzzled. Come to think of it, there aren't many customers. And the pizza is so good. It's better to see it than to just talk about it. Follow me for a second. We went outside. I hadn't noticed it much while sitting, but seeing him walk from behind, he definitely had a limp. He used to run around just fine even carrying that heavy mortar. After leaving the alley, we arrived at a 6-lane road. Standing at the crosswalk, he pointed ahead. See that store? Across the crosswalk was a large 8-story building. And on the second floor of that building was a pizza place. The sign was the same, Meister Pizza. A large banner on the window read, all pizzas 40% off. Unlike his store, which was completely empty, the store across the street was bustling with customers. I asked in bewilderment, what is that? Kim Jae-hak put a cigarette in his mouth. The headquarters direct branch. It opened there 2 months ago. The headquarters direct branch opened less than 100 meters away? After his honorable discharge from the military, Kim Jae-hak underwent rehabilitation and worried about how he would make a living. He eventually decided to pursue his long-time dream of starting his own business. He had experience working in restaurants, so he was confident in his ability to run one. Given his leg condition, it would be difficult to do something like a Korean barbecue restaurant that required long hours of standing or serving. After much consideration, he chose a franchise, specifically Meister Pizza. Although it was a relatively new brand, he trusted it because of its excellent taste and the solid foundation of its headquarters. He signed a franchise agreement with the headquarters and leased a commercial space. While the store interior was being set up, he underwent various training programs. Several months later, Meister Pizza branch number 15 opened in Payu. The pizza market, while not as intense as the chicken market, was still highly competitive. For the first few months after opening, he struggled. However, thanks to the headquarters' TV commercials featuring famous celebrities and his own diligent efforts, his sales gradually increased. He gained regular customers and saw his profits grow, giving him hope that he could do even better if he continued to work hard. Then one day, a manager from the headquarters came to his store. The manager suggested that he expand to a 2-story location, citing the growing commercial area and population in the region. He had only been in business for a year and was just starting to find his footing. Expanding would require moving locations and completely redoing the interior. It was too risky, especially since he hadn't yet recouped his initial investment. Several higher-ups from the headquarters visited him sequentially, urging him to expand, but he refused each time. A few months ago they stopped visiting and he thought the matter was over. But one day on his way to work he saw a Meister Pizza sign going up on the main road across the street. After Kim Jae-hak finished his story, Ellie asked, "Didn't you try complaining to the headquarters?" "Of course I did. I went straight to the headquarters to protest." When he complained about opening a direct branch so close to a franchise location, the headquarters argued that they were opening the direct branch for customer convenience and that there was no problem since they were in different administrative districts. It was true that the administrative districts changed on either side of the 6-lane road. But only politicians and civil servants cared about that. No one else would. From a consumer's perspective, it was just a matter of crossing the street. If they were selling the same brand and the same food, there was no question which one consumers would choose: the small store in the alley or the large 2-story store on the main road. When he kept going back to complain, they eventually refused to meet with him and even used security guards to drag him out. They warned me that if I kept this up, there could be other disadvantages later, so I couldn't complain anymore. Headquarters have many ways to penalize franchise owners. Therefore, franchisees have no choice but to be mindful of the headquarters' actions. Just because there's already a kimchi stew restaurant nearby doesn't mean you can't open another kimchi stew restaurant close by. This is because the products are different. The newly opened restaurant's kimchi stew has a different taste, quantity, and price. The choice of which kimchi stew to choose rests entirely with the consumer. However, franchises sell the same products at the same prices. Therefore, they usually have their own restrictions on opening locations in close proximity. Of course, it's not unheard of for the same franchise to open in the same area, but that's usually in places with high foot traffic like Gangnam, Hongdae, or Myeongdong. This wasn't some central area of Seoul or a famous tourist destination. How much foot traffic could there possibly be? From the moment the direct branch opened nearby, a drop in sales was inevitable. The bigger problem than the direct branch itself is the discount. As an opening promotion, the direct branch immediately started offering a 40% discount on all items. When a place selling the same pizza for 40% less opened up, his sales naturally plummeted. Now he had virtually no customers at all. So what are you going to do? Well, once the discount ends, things will get better. People might go to the other place to eat in, but at least my delivery sales will recover, right? But the opening promotion had been going on for 2 months already, and there was no word on when it would end. His store was practically closed. The ingredients he ordered from the headquarters were going straight into the trash without being used. But can they even make a profit selling at that price? Kim Jae-hak shook his head. Even if you ignore the ingredient costs, you're looking at a loss considering the rent and labor costs. When he complained about the opening promotion, the headquarters told him that he could offer the same 40% discount if he wanted to. The headquarters could afford to operate at a loss, but his franchise couldn't. At this rate, he would have to close down within a few months. Kim Jae-hak let out a long sigh. I wouldn't feel so wronged if I had done something wrong or if business was bad due to the economy. It was maddening to see his business fail because of the headquarters while he was working hard. He stroked his right leg and muttered, "I don't know what others might think, but I poured all the compensation I received for losing my leg into this place. I can't get a job anywhere with this body, let alone a part-time job. If this store goes under, I'm finished." Franchise headquarters all claim to strive for mutual benefit with their franchisees. The idea is that if the franchisees thrive, the headquarters will also thrive. That's true in theory, but the reality is a bit different. When a franchise fails, the owner loses their entire investment, while for the headquarters, it's just a slight setback. They can simply recruit other franchisees. Therefore, the relationship between headquarters and franchisees is inherently one of superiority and subordination. This isn't just the case with franchises, it's the same in all fields. In democracy it's one person, one vote, but in capitalism it's one vote. Whether it's finance or industry, having more money always gives you an advantage. If left solely to market principles, the wealthy will monopolize everything. To prevent this, there are laws like the Fair Trade Act and the Franchise Business Act. But, as always, the law doesn't provide much help. Ellie looked at me and asked, "Why is Korea like this?" I had no answer. The abuse of power by franchise headquarters has a long history. Unilateral termination of franchise agreements, forced interior renovations, excessive marketing fees, and the kickbacks added to the cost of supplied materials, among others. Every time a problem arose, the need to amend the Franchise Business Act was highlighted, but the relevant laws were still languishing in the National Assembly. Is this why they call it Hell Josian? Of course, there are many franchises where the headquarters and franchisees coexist without major issues. However, if you encounter the wrong headquarters, the franchisee ends up shedding tears of blood, as is happening now. What kind of company is the franchise headquarters? It's MCK Group. MCK. That name sounded familiar. What do they do? You know Master Chicken? Meister Pizza is an affiliate of theirs. Master Chicken, as in Chai Myung-ho? Kim Jae-hak nodded. That's right. The CEO of Meister Pizza is Chai Myung-ho. I never expected it to be related to Master Chicken. Ellie noticed my expression and asked, "What's wrong?" I chuckled dryly. It's nothing. It just brought back some old memories. What a twist of fate, that my junior from university would be mistreating my military senior. I thought back to the business administration junior I had seen at university years ago. I thought he had learned his lesson, but it seemed old habits die hard. Anyway, now that I knew, I couldn't just stand idly by. I said to him, who was sighing deeply with a gloomy expression, "Don't worry. I'll help you." How? I had a lot of money. But that didn't mean I could do whatever I wanted. If I used my financial power to unfairly attack Meister Pizza, it would be no different from the abuse of power that chaebols are known for. And these days, public opinion wouldn't stand for that. For example, if Chairman Im Jin-young tried to bankrupt Hungbu Stew, what would people think? So, what was the best way to resolve this situation? I knew about cars, batteries, and IT, but I didn't know much about the restaurant business. I hadn't even worked a part-time job at a restaurant. When you don't know something, you should consult an expert. I thought about whether I knew any restaurant industry experts. Fortunately, one person came to mind. I immediately made a call. "Hello, CEO Kong Jin-hoo." "Hello, President Im Soo-mi." The flagship businesses of Salon Hotel were its hotels and duty-free shops. However, the hotels across the country also operated their own cafes, bakeries, Korean restaurants, and buffets. These restaurants were all known for their excellent food, and the bakery brand had even been launched as a separate franchise. Therefore, she would know quite a bit about the restaurant industry. "I'm calling because I have a favor to ask." I felt a little bad for only contacting her when I needed something. President Im Soo-mi said with a cheerful voice, "If it's a request from you, I will definitely grant it." I briefly explained the situation and then said, "Could you possibly send a franchise expert?" "Of course. I'll send one right away." "Thank you." After ending the call, I said to the two of them, "An expert will be here soon, so let's hear what they have to say." About an hour later, a black S-Class Maybach pulled up in front of the store, and a middle-aged woman in a suit came inside. "Hello." I was surprised to see her. "You only needed to send an expert." President Im Soo-mi smiled and said, "I'm the biggest expert in this field." "Oh, really?" Kim Jae-hak was also clearly taken aback. Who would have expected the president of Salon Hotel to come to a franchise pizza place in an alley? It was like getting a Windows error and having Bill Gates show up to fix your computer. "I haven't had lunch. Could you make me a pizza first?" "Ah, yes, of course." Kim Jae-hak went into the kitchen and quickly started making a pizza. President Im Soo-mi sat down and tried the freshly made pizza. "I've had it a few times before and it's definitely delicious." MCK Group places a high value on taste and quality, even having separate menu development and quality control teams. Master Chicken had faced several controversies over the headquarters and chairman's abuse of power. There had even been boycotts, but they were short-lived. The impact on sales was minimal. While some people valued ethical consumption, most consumers prioritized brand recognition, price, and taste. Regardless of his character, Master Chicken's chairman Chai Dae-ho clearly had business acumen. He certainly didn't skimp on investments, especially when it came to taste and quality. Excellent taste, a systematic operation, and consistent service across all locations were Master Chicken's greatest strengths. It wasn't for nothing that they had climbed to the top of the fiercely competitive chicken market. Kim Jae-hak nodded. "I also considered several pizza franchises, but after trying them I chose Meister Pizza because it was the most delicious. I took a look at the newly opened direct branch on the way here. The distance is definitely too close. Considering the foot traffic in this area, there's no reason for two branches of the same franchise to exist. I don't know what happened, but you could say the headquarters is trying to kill this franchise. What does the headquarters gain from doing that? As you may have noticed, new apartments are being built, and there's a lot of land development happening. Of course, it will take a few more years for people to move in, but it's clear that the commercial area here will grow. If the franchise can't hold on and closes down, the direct branch will take its place. Listening to her, it seemed that headquarters taking over successful franchises in this way was common practice in the franchise industry. So, what's the best course of action? The simplest solution would be for you to step in and protest. The headquarters might ignore a franchise owner's complaints, but they wouldn't ignore mine. President Msumi looked at me and said, "If the headquarters finds out about the relationship between you and the franchise owner, they will immediately apologize and close the direct branch." There was no need to make things difficult when they could be easily resolved. Let's go to the headquarters and talk to them. Kim Jae-hak shook his head. I told you I went to the headquarters several times to protest and they kicked me out. They won't even accept a meeting request now and they won't let me inside the building. I said to him reassuringly, "Don't worry. You're coming with me,